Well, hi, Kathy. It's wonderful to be back with you. Thanks for joining us again.
I love being with you too. You
Right.
get me teaching in areas that I hadn't taught before sometimes. So I love doing this with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, today I have a question. You've talked about how what you call the nature of thought has been a key piece that you share with both prisoners and engineers alike.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if you can say something about the nature of thought and how that's made such a big difference in the lives of these people who live in such very different worlds.
Wow, that's a big question. Let me sit back for a minute. Well, actually, you know, when we talk about these principles, we talk about how they manifest, how we're in thought and whatever thought is, consciousness gives you the physical experience of our thinking. We become aware that we're creating some kind of experience. And I never knew that before. I never considered that my experience was coming this way. I always thought, well, it's my environment or another person, or, I always thought it was happening that way. And so when we talk about thought, people can get really into more concrete thinking about thought, like what it is and how it shows up and is a good thought or bad thought. And I always want to take people back to the nature of thought, meaning thought is this formless energy that comes through us. It allows us, with our brain to create thoughts, just any kind of thoughts. So we don't focus on what the thoughts are. We talk about just the nature of how thought shows up inside of us, which is a different way of seeing things. It's kind of like, well, what is the nature of the ocean? Well, you would talk about, well, it what it's composed of. It has salt. It has, the tide comes in and out. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it functions. And so we want to talk about how it functions through us, as opposed to getting into the nitty gritty of what the thoughts are and examining our thoughts or tracking our thoughts. That's not what we're talking about. And that can be confusing. I mean, I've been trained in cognitive approach where you literally look at what your thoughts are and you look at changing them or reframing them or doing something with them, as opposed to I'm just in thought right now and not making meaning about anything that's coming through your mind. Because the nature of thought is it's just this, it's like smoke. And I've said this before, it's just smoke that is just comes through and it dissipates. But if you don't know that, then you think every thought is real and concrete, and I need to chip away at it or I need to consider it. When we're saying no, thought is just steam or smoke, which is very different. So the nature is formless, but it comes through us, and then we create whatever it is we see in front of us. We actually create the form of it. But prior to coming through us, it's formless. It's just formless. So, and I'll just talk about it in different ways depending on which group I'm with, in terms of using metaphors. But basically, I just want people to get a sense of that. It's not like you can grab onto it with your head. Because when people try to, like, I remember asking one of my mentors, Roger Mills, I said, now, Roger, what is the thing that actually happens? How does that happen when somebody has an insight? I mean, they go from having all this heavy concrete thinking to poof, and they just see something, they have like a life-changing insight. Like, how does that happen? He said, if I knew that, I would be a wealthy man. And I'm like, really? He said, it's a mystery, but yet we see the evidence of it. And so we are the evidence of thought. We are the evidence of consciousness. We are the proof of the power of it. And also, I like to consider what powers me is what's powering the stars and the planets, and now they're seeing other universes, and well, what's up with all that? What's keeping all that going, right? Well, it's kind of like that's the nature of whatever you want to call this. It's keeping everything going. And so I just like to stay more in that realm,
Mhm.
and that takes us out of our personal mind to consider, wow, there's more than me. There's more than me.
Yeah, that's really big. And it's interesting what I hear you saying is that in discussing the nature of thought, it kind of moves away from a common experience that, of course, I used to hold as well, that thought is kind of concrete. And if it's a thought that I don't like, I've got to kind of chip away at it. Somehow
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
got to do something to it. And I would guess that that's the basis of what you're talking to people about in prison or engineers
yeah, yeah.
that they're getting stuck on. That's,
Right, 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 right,
they're
right.
treating thought as though,
Yeah,
it's something I've got to change, I've got to deal with. So how would you share that, say, in a prison
yeah,
that they would be able to hear it and make it
yeah.
practical, not this big airy fairy?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And actually, they're in other programs, they're in other classes, they're in cognitive behavioral, they're in 12 step. One of the big things in 12 step is to monitor your thinking. And there's what they call red flag thinking. So if you start thinking about drugs, you start thinking about using drugs, it's almost like they tell them, all right, you're in trouble already. Now, it's interesting. If you just have a thought about something and you're in trouble already, think of all the thoughts we have that we never did anything about. Like I've had thoughts where I wanted to, you know, slash the tires of another, car that cut me off and parked in front of me. And now I want to slash his tires right now. Well, I know that's just the thought that I'm having. And I'll never forget this. Linda Pransky and George came into the jail with me. And what struck them was the inmates said they didn't know. They thought if they had a thought that they had to go with it.
Mm.
Like they didn't see that thought just comes and
Mhm.
goes. They didn't see the nature of thought. They thought, well, if I have a thought that, hey, this guy disrespected me and I have to do something and my culture tells me I need to go kill him, well, then they would go follow that. And they told Linda and George, they said it never dawned on them that they didn't have to go with any thought that they had. And they were taken aback, George taken aback because you really see how the difference where it's a concrete thought. I need to go kill another human being because they disrespected me or my homies or my family, as opposed to, yeah, man, I want to go kill that guy because of how he treated my family or my homies. And then realizing, yeah, well, okay, that's just my thinking. See, that never dawned on them.
Yeah. Wow.
So you can imagine. And so they're told, well, you need to monitor those. Well, it
Mhm.
takes thought to manage thought.
Yeah.
It takes thought to change thought. So now you're adding thought on top of thought. And the guys picked up on this really quickly. They said, well, here's the difference, Cathy. What you're saying is just see it as thought and you don't have to do anything. Or you don't see it as thought and you see, okay, I'm tripping on something. I'm tripping, I'm tripping. Now I'm tripping that I'm tripping. And then I go into I'm tripping that I'm tripping that I'm tripping. And that's why we end up in here because we're just buried in thought and we do anything we can to get out of it. And that may be doing something drastic,
Yeah.
like killing another human being. So
Yeah.
they got the difference.
Wow.
They got the difference. Now with professional people, they've become successful, which and they it's really cute because of my thinking, because of my
Mm.
intellect, I have been successful. And I always say to them, well, guess what? Yes, you have this intellectual capacity, but what allowed you to be successful has nothing to do with that. There was this other dimension of thought that's been doing all the heavy lifting, but you just didn't know.
Wow.
And they look at me like, what now? What do you mean? I said, well, we think we have to think super, super hard to get to where we need to be. But if you understand the nature of thought, you need to know information, you need to know data, but then you want to use it as needed and just the right way. Well, insight, wisdom, intuition, energy, whatever you want to call it, that's what allows you to use whatever thinking you're having in a way that responds to exactly what's required. And I said, so I hate to tell you this. Yes, you're smart guys, but that didn't get you to where you are. There's this other thing that's been going on, but now you can trust it and and rely on it to help you use your intellectual capacity. And so, and the people who come up with these inventions out of the blue, they know what we're talking about because they'll say, we think hard, we look at the data, we look at the equations, they have a whole whiteboard of all this information, but somebody invariably will have this profound insight that cuts through all of that. And it advances them to the next level of knowledge.
Yeah.
That's how we've progressed.
Yeah.
I have a cute story about, everybody knows Michael Neal. Do you guys know Michael Neal?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He's such a wonderful guy. He invited me up to Napa. He was doing a training and a couple of people didn't show up. And he said, well, listen, come on up. We have, free food, free, if you want to come up and hang out with us. And I've done work with him before. He said, and just be my guest. You can just be my guest. But I'm just going to ask you to do one thing for me. And I'll tell you when I get there. I said, fine, sure, I'll go to Napa. It's about 3 hours away from where I live. So he has this group of folks and he was doing his class. It was wonderful just to sit there and listen to him. He said, okay, now, Cathy, I need you to help me with something. I'm like, okay. So he brings me in front of the room. He said, I am really stuck. And this is a real life thing for him. I said, okay, well, what are you stuck with? And he has his whiteboard. And he said, I don't know what to call my second book. I can't come up with the title. I've finished the first book. I think I'm working on it. I think he said he's working on the third book and he knows the title for that. He's almost finished with the second book. The publisher, they're waiting for the title and he can't come up with the title. Cathy, you've got to help me come up with the title. Like, okay. So he proceeds to go to the whiteboard and he does all this writing about the first book was this and the third, and he's just all this writing all over the whiteboard to explain to me what the deal was. So I'm watching this and after a while I'm like, I can't even keep up with it. I've lost track of whatever he's talking about. So he turns to me, I said, so what do you think? I mean, what do you think? I said, Michael, look at that whiteboard. And he turns to me and goes, oh my God, that's what's going on in your head. No wonder you can't. And he says, oh my God, I didn't realize that. And I said, well, you think? I mean, it was really obvious. And in that moment, he came up with the title. Wow. Literally, in that moment, he said, this is what I'm going to call it. And I'm like, wow. So the people in the group, they're like, how did she do that? Like, what happened? And again, Michael thought he had to overconsider and examine everything. And his mind was so full of data, information, and whatever, he couldn't see the forest for the trees. But when I said, look at that whiteboard, I'm in overwhelm, and it just hit him like a ton of bricks. It absolutely hit him like a ton of bricks. I will never forget it. So we just get super busy. We've been taught to do that. We need to analyze, reconsider, check it over, back and forth. And I'm not saying you don't need to do that kind of stuff, but we tend to go nuts with it, until we can't see anything. So the engineers in the corporate world, when I ask them, well, what do you guys do when you get bogged down and you get stuck on a problem? Because they're a team and they're working on a problem. And one guy goes, well, I get so frustrated. I just walk around the campus of the company. It's this huge campus. He said, I just go out and just start walking around because I can't deal with it anymore. And I said, well, then what happens? Well, when I come back, it's so obvious what the issue is. I said, so why do you think that happened? He said, well, I guess I just took my mind off of it. And he said, I do that a lot. And I said, well, that's what we're talking about. See, we tend to want to go into the problem and analyze, instead of stepping back and allowing our minds to get free and clear and wait for an answer or wait to see something. And the other guys said they shared the same thing. One guy said, yeah, sometimes I'll drive home and I'm just so frustrated and I'm just done with the whole thing. And invariably he's almost home and he sees something. He turns the car around, he goes back, or another guy actually said, well, when I take a shower, That's where I get my ideas, a lot of ideas, and which is what I get mine when I blow dry my hair. When I blow dry my hair and I'm getting ready to do training and I'm not sure how I should start or which way I should go about something, I'll be drying my hair and all of a sudden, oh, that's what I'm going to do. So again, the nature of thought is more is not better.
Mm.
We're thinking, well, you've got to set your mind to it, as opposed to, well, you take what you know and you step back from what you know and wait for that other part of you to recognize or to see something new about what you have in front of you.
Beautiful.
And it never fails me. It never fails me because now I rely on that. I truly rely on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big shower person too, Kathy. I love that time when it just comes to me, as opposed to having to think hard.
Isn't it great? Isn't it
Mhm.
great? And the thing is, we've all had that experience, but now I'm saying, see, you can count on that now. That is a true, that is how the nature of thought is. You can rely on that. In the New Yorker magazine, they had a cartoon of three businessmen with briefcases walking into a shower. How cool is that? I have that card. I have it somewhere. I said, that's it right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's recognized. People know this. But what we're saying is that is the nature of how your mind works. And the more you see it as that's it, that is it, then you can build that into how you work. And so the company started kind of noticing when they'd have meetings, once invariably one person will say, hey, we're getting bogged down, and they would say, oh, you're okay. Somebody would be like the hall monitor. Okay, we're getting bogged down. Okay, we need to back up. I mean, they included that into their culture to
Beautiful.
recognize, because we get caught up. I mean, we
Yeah.
invariably, I still get caught up. But at some point you kind of realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm overthinking this. And what did the wise people in our lives used to say? Just go sleep on it. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Take your mind off of it.
Yeah. It's beautiful. So we've all known this all along, but without being consciously aware of it, we haven't had the facility to really utilize it well in our lives.
And that's why the principles are so wonderful, because they explain it. They explain, and when I train groups of people or work with individuals, I want them to reflect on their own experience of it. And then once they share that, I say, now here's the deal. This is what actually happened. And you can rely on that because you've experienced already, you know it's true. But I used to think I was just lucky, or it was like a hit and miss kind of thing. Sometimes you get an idea. I didn't know you could count on it.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of how these principles work, because of the nature of how thought comes through us.
Yeah.
And if you're overthinking it, it crowds it, it makes it harder for the fresh new idea to come through. Although it potentially could cut through all of it.
Mhm.
It can cut through everything and come just straight out of the blue. And now you're in a whole different world. You're seeing something totally new.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, thanks so much, Kathy. I think this
My
is a
pleasure.
real clarification of the nature of thought, from the common approach to this is what thinking is, and this is how we can find greater peace in our lives by managing our thinking, as opposed to seeing the nature of thought and how that can give us the foundation for real peace and ease in our lives.
Absolutely. And that we always have a pull to overthink things. And so I'm not saying there's no right or wrong about this. It's just start to get hip to the fact that, oh, I'm just see it. But don't worry about managing it or changing it. Just appreciate, oh, I've just gone in that direction, and there's nothing lost. But if you get on a mission, well, I need to have better thinking, or I need to not think too much, that's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Really
Thank
clear.
you.
I loved it. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. See you
Okay.
next time.
We'll see you next
Okay.
time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
now.